Boredom might be the most underestimated force in human history. You have felt it today. Maybe it was a meeting that went 15 minutes too long. Maybe it was a Sunday afternoon with nothing to do and nowhere to be. Maybe it was the specific, particular agony of waiting for something, for anything, while time moved slower than it had any right to. And your instinct in that moment was probably to reach for your phone. But here's the thing, your ancestors couldn't do that. For 300,000 years, when boredom arrived, there was no screen to reach for, no notification to chase, no algorithm to hand your attention to. There was just the boredom. And what they did with it changed everything. Let's start with what boredom actually is, because most people think of boredom as nothing, as empty time, as a problem to be solved. But neuroscientists now understand that boredom is not nothing. It is a state, a very specific, very active neurological state. In 2014, researchers at the University of Virginia ran an experiment that became one of the most talked about studies in psychology. They put participants in a room with nothing to do for 15 minutes. No phone, no book, no music, just a chair, 4 walls, and time. And one other thing, a button. The button delivered a mild but unpleasant electric shock. The participants had already tried it before the experiment and confirmed, yes, it was unpleasant, they would pay money not to experience it. Then they were left alone for 15 minutes with nothing to do. 67% of men and 25% of women chose to shock themselves rather than sit quietly with their own thoughts. One man shocked himself 190 times. Think about that. People chose physical pain over the discomfort of having nothing to do. Boredom, it turns out, is not peaceful. It is pressure. It is the brain demanding input, demanding stimulation, demanding something. And when nothing comes, it generates discomfort so intense that pain becomes preferable to stillness. So what happened when that pressure built in an ancient human with no phone, no book, no button? The first thing they did was move. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer groups, the closest living analog to ancient human behavior, have documented that boredom-driven movement was constant. When there was no immediate task, people walked. Not to get anywhere, just walked. They picked things up and put them down. They rearranged objects. They wandered to the edge of the camp and back. This wasn't aimlessness. This was the brain forcing the body into exploration mode. Because for most of human history, an idle body in a dangerous world was a dead body. The brain learned to make stillness uncomfortable, precisely because stillness was dangerous. If you weren't moving, you weren't finding food, you weren't monitoring threats, you weren't building the social connections that kept you alive. Boredom was evolution's way of saying, get up and do something. But then, something happened that nobody predicted. The somethings they got up and did started to matter. In 2021, archaeologist April Nowell at the University of Victoria published a comprehensive review of early human creativity. What she found was that the oldest known art, cave paintings, carved figurines, geometric engravings, almost never appeared near sites of intensive daily activity. They appeared in the quiet places, the alcoves, the corners of caves where the firelight barely reached, the places where people went when there was nothing else to do. The oldest known decorative object in the world is a piece of ochre from Blombos Cave in South Africa, engraved with a geometric crosshatch pattern, roughly 77,000 years old. It serves no practical purpose. It doesn't help you hunt. It doesn't store food. It doesn't protect you from predators. Someone made it because they had time, and their mind needed something to do with that time. Boredom made the first art. But it didn't stop there, because when ancient humans got bored together, and they often did, especially during the long, dark hours after the fire was built and before sleep came. Something else emerged. They talked. Not about logistics, not about where the deer were or which berries were ready, about imaginary things, about things that didn't exist, about what would happen if. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar at Oxford has spent decades studying the evolution of language. His conclusion was controversial when he first proposed it and is now widely accepted. Language did not evolve primarily to share information. It evolved to gossip, to talk about people who weren't there, to construct social narratives about relationships, about status, about who did what to whom, and why it mattered. And the engine that drove those conversations, the thing that made humans sit together and talk into the night about nothing in particular, was boredom. Idle minds needed to process something, and other people, their motives, their stories, their drama, were the most endlessly fascinating processing material available. Every novel ever written, every film ever made, every piece of gossip ever whispered traces back to a bored human sitting in the dark needing something to think about. But here's what nobody tells you about boredom. It doesn't just produce things, it produces the right things. In 2019, psychologists Sandy Mann and Rebecca Cadman at the University of Central Lancashire ran an experiment. They split participants into two groups. One group was given a boring task, copying numbers from a phone book for 20 minutes. The other group went straight to a creativity test. The bored group outperformed the non-bored group significantly on every measure of creative thinking. Not slightly, significantly. Because boredom, as it turns out, activates a specific brain network that focused, task-oriented thinking actually suppresses. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network. It activates when you stop focusing on the outside world and start focusing inward, when you daydream, when you let your mind wander without a destination. It is the network associated with imagination, with self-reflection, with the ability to simulate futures that don't exist yet. And it only fully activates when you are bored enough to stop trying to be productive. Your ancient ancestors, sitting around a fire with nothing particular to do, were running this network at full power for hours every night. They were doing the cognitive equivalent of deep maintenance on the most complex machine in the known universe. They were imagining, they were planning, they were constructing the mental models of the future that would become agriculture, architecture, language, and civilization. Boredom wasn't the enemy of progress, it was the engine. And then we destroyed it. The average person today encounters a boredom trigger, a moment of unstructured time, and reaches for a screen within 8 seconds. 8 seconds. The default mode network needs roughly 12 minutes of undirected mental wandering to fully activate. We are interrupting it every 8 seconds. Every time you reach for your phone in a waiting room, in a queue, in the 30 seconds before sleep, you are turning off the most generative cognitive state your brain can produce. You are solving a problem that was never supposed to be solved. Because the discomfort of boredom, that restless, itching, ancient pressure, is not a malfunction. It is the feeling of your brain trying to create something. Your ancestors sat with that feeling for hours. They let it build until it became a story, a picture scratched into stone, a song, an idea. We kill it in 8 seconds with a notification. So the next time boredom arrives, that particular restlessness, that sense that time is moving wrong and your mind needs somewhere to go, try something your ancestors did. Don't reach for the phone, just sit with it. Let it build. Because somewhere in that discomfort, in that restless, itching, ancient pressure, something is trying to be made. It has always been trying. For 300,000 years, it has been trying. And all it needs is 8 seconds more.